So, Assalamu alaikum. Today I will discuss about discuss about today I'll discuss about sorry the microphone testing hormone secretion, transport, and clearance from the blood. Hormones secretion after a stimulus and duration of action of different hormones. So this chapter will make us understand about the hormone secretion, about the transport and clearance from the blood. Hormone secretion after a stimulus and duration of action of different hormones. Some hormones, such as norepinephrine and epinephrine, are secreted within seconds after the gland is stimulated and may develop full action within another few seconds to minutes. The actions of other hormones, such as thyroxine or growth hormone, may require months for full effect. So, within seconds, acts the hormones are norepinephrine and epinephrine, and for a long time, the hormones that works thyroxine and growth hormone. Thus, each of the different hormones has its own characteristics, onset, and duration of action. Concentration of hormones in the circulating blood and hormonal secretion rate. The concentration of hormones required to control most metabolic and endocrine functions are incredibly small. Their concentration in the blood ranges as little as 1 picogram, which is 1 millionth of a gram, in each millimeter of blood, up to at most a few microgram. A millionth of a gram is called microgram. So the concentration of hormone may be as little as 1 picogram to few microgram. Similarly, the rates of secretion of various hormones are extremely small, usually measured in milligrams or milligrams per day, micrograms or milligrams. We shall see later in this chapter that highly specialized mechanisms are available in the target tissues that allow even these minute quantities of hormones to exert powerful control over the physiological system. Feedback control of hormone secretion. Feedback. We have discussed or we have read what is negative feedback and what is positive feedback. Negative feedback prevents overactivity of hormone system. That is, if the hormone secretion is increased, it will be controlled by negative feedback system. Although the plasma concentration of many hormones fluctuate in response to various stimuli that occur throughout the day, all hormones studied thus far appear to be closely controlled. In most cases, this control is exerted through negative feedback mechanism that ensure a proper level of hormone activity at the target tissue. After a stimulus causes release of hormone, conditions or products resulting from the action of the hormone tend to suppress its further release. In other words, so negative feedback controls over secretion, over activity, or less secretion, less activity. If it is less, then it will be increased, and when it is increased, it will be decreased. This mechanism is called negative feedback system. The control variable is sometimes the degree of activity of the target tissue rather than the synthesis or secretory rates of the hormones. Therefore, only when the target tissue activity rises to an appropriate level will feedback signals to the endocrine glands become powerful enough to slow further synthesis and secretion of the hormone. Surge of hormone can occur with positive. So there is another feedback system, that is positive feedback system, can also be helpful sometimes to increase the secretion. That is, when the secretion is increased, it will be stimulated by a feedback system that is called positive feedback system. In few cases, positive feedback occurs when a biological action of hormone causes additional secretion of the hormone. One example is positive. One example of positive feedback is surge of luteinizing hormone, that is LA surge, that occurs as a result of the stimulatory effect of estrogen on the antipituitary before ovulation. That is, before ovulation, LH hormone secretion is increased more and more by positive feedback system. The secreted the secreted LH then acts on the ovaries to stimulate additional secretion of estrogen. Remember it. The secreted LH then acts on the ovaries to stimulate additional secretion of estrogen, which in turn causes more secretion of LH. Eventually, LH reaches an appropriate concentration and typical negative feedback control. Hormone secretion is then exerted. So, up to the level, the LH secretion will be increased for ovulation. Cyclical variation occurs in hormone release. Cyclical variations. Superimposed of the negative and positive feedback control of hormone secretion are periodic variations in hormone release that are influenced by seasonal changes, various stages of development and aging. That is, all the hormones are not secreted in equally in all time. It is secreted according to season, age, and a stage of development. The diurnal cycle. Diurnal means daily cycle and sleep. For example, secretion of growth hormone is markedly increased during the early period of sleep, but is reduced during the later stages of sleep. In many cases, these cyclical variations in hormone secretion are due to changes in activity of neural pathways involved in controlling hormone. So, what we understand, growth hormone is an example where it is found that growth hormone secretion is increased during the early period of sleep, but reduced during the later stages of sleep. Oscillation of endocrine signaling are driven in part of circadian clocks. Oscillations of endocrine signaling are driven in the in part by circadian clock, that is circadian rhythm. The suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus serves as a master clock that controls rhythmic pattern of biological clocks in many parts of the body, including neuroendocrine cells and endocrine glands. There is also evidence of local clock control in peripheral endocrine tissues such as adrenal gland and pancreas, which have cyclical changes in their sensitivity to various signals. Cyclical changes in tissue responsiveness and fluctuation in hormone concentration provide important mechanisms for the body to anticipate and adapt to the dramatic changes in stresses and demands that normally occur over the course of a day, ranging from restful sleep to eating meals, high level of mental and physical activity, rhythmic changes in female sex hormones that occur with an average 28 cycle and are also essential for reproduction. So this is these are called cyclical changes, cyclical secretion. Next, we'll discuss about transport of hormones in the blood. How hormones are transported. Water soluble hormones that means peptide and catecholamine, peptide and protein hormones are called water soluble hormones. These water soluble hormones are dissolved in the plasma and transported from their sites of synthesis to target tissues where they diffuse out of the capillaries into the interstitial fluid and ultimately to target cells. On the other hand, steroid and thyroid hormones. Steroid and thyroid hormones, in contrast, circulate in the blood while being mainly bound to plasma proteins. They are bound to plasma proteins. Usually less than 10% of steroid or thyroid hormones in the plasma exist free in solution. For example, more than 99% of thyroxine in the blood is bound to plasma protein. However, protein-bound hormones cannot easily diffuse across the capillaries and gain access to their target cells and are therefore biologically inactive until they dissociate from plasma protein. So steroid and thyroid hormones are bound to plasma proteins but cannot, in this bounding condition, they cannot cross the capillaries. The relatively large amounts of hormones of proteins serve as reservoirs, replenishing the concentration of free hormones when they are bound to target receptors or lost from the circulation. Binding of hormones to plasma proteins greatly slows their clearance from the plasma. So, next, how the hormones are cleared from the blood. Two factors that increase or decrease the concentration of hormone in the blood: the rate of hormone secretion into the blood, the rate of removal of the hormone from the blood. So, hormone concentration depends on the hormone secretion and hormone removal. The rate of removal of hormone from the blood, which is called metabolic clearance rate, and usually expressed in terms of number of milliliters of plasma cleared of the hormone per minute. To calculate this clearance rate, one measure the rate of disappearance of hormone from the plasma concentration of the hormone, then metabolic clearance rate is calculated by this equation. So you will have you, you can read it, but it's not very important to memorize. Hormones are cleared from the plasma in several ways. So what are the ways? Metabolic destruction by the tissues, binding with the tissues, excretion by the liver into the bile, excretion by the kidneys into the urine. For example, excess steroid hormone accumulate when the liver is diseased because steroid hormones are conjugated mainly in the liver and then cleared into the bile. Remember it. Hormones are sometimes degraded at their target cells by enzymatic process that cause endocytosis of the cell membrane hormone receptor complex. The hormone is then metabolized in the cell and the receptors are usually recycled back to the cell membrane. So it can be degraded at the target cell. Most of the peptide hormones and catecholamines are water soluble and circulate freely in the blood. They are usually degraded by enzymes in the blood and tissues and rapidly excreted by the kidneys and liver, thus remaining in the blood for only a short time. For example, the half-life of angiotensin II circulating in the blood is less than a minute. Hormones that are bound to plasma proteins are cleared from the blood at much slower rates and may remain in the circulation for several hours or even days. The half-life of adrenal steroid in the circulation, for example, ranges from 20 to 100 minutes, whereas the half-life of protein-bound thyroid hormones may be as long as 1 to 6 days. So, uh, these are the this topic, hormone secretion and transport and clearance of the blood, is very important for you. How it is transported, which hormones are transported, in which form, you will have to understand it, and how it is cleared from the blood, and which hormone is half-life of which hormones are long, like thyroid, like protein binding bound thyroid hormone, and which hormones are free hormones like protein and polypeptide. So you will have to read through it and you will have to remember for MCQ question. Thank you.